So this is part 2, the default status at Helb, right? It wasn't perfect. So between 1987 and 2000, enrollment in public universities, it grew by 400%, but government funding, it grew by 30%. The government could not keep up with the number of students that were increasing. So many, population was rising, and then the demand for student loans was also rising. So the government was trying as much as possible to put up cash for those student loans, but it couldn't. It could only put up 30%. The growth was 400%. The cost of higher education was going up as well. So not only that the students are increasing, but the cost of educating them is also increasing. And Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. And it never works. That's why Venezuela is in problems. Nicaragua, Cuba, and all the other countries, right? Because eventually you run out of other people's money. And the government did. It could not keep up. Yearly funding reached a high of 880 million in 1995. It dropped to 600 million. Remember, 1995 was when Helb was introduced. It dropped to 600 million in the early 2000s, a 32% decline. This self-sufficiency of Helb, trying to make it self-sufficient, it's kind of like it was working to some extent. And so the government wanted, let's push that area. This free stuff, we can't handle it. And here's the funny thing. When Helb was set up, the board inherited a large number of unpaid debts. Remember, it was an unstructured system. Goals, no policies. Educators, not professionals in financial management. The rate of recovery was 3.3% only in 1995. So 2004, the rate of recovery increased to 18%. It sounds like a small increase, right? But it's a big deal because it moved from close to zero and now it's improving. After what? After you try and semi-privatize that sector. So loan performance by 2010 was at 57%. So from 2004 at 18%, 2010, 57%. The amount of debt not repaid now is 7.2 billion. But we've moved from far. After we've taken away the free stuff, and after we've really privatized it, as opposed to an idea of privatizing it, right? Moving away from the ministry, let's say making it a semi-autonomous body within the Ministry of Education. So the bulk of the recoveries, where did these recoveries come from? They came from the government and public bodies, parastatals and all of those things. Because the government could catch the defaulters who during the period of laissez-faire management of student loans had run away. So the government could catch them if they are within its institutions. Teachers alone accounted for 56% of the recoveries. Education sector, people who major in education, I'll touch on that as we go. So together with the government and teachers, they accounted for 76% of the recoveries. So where is the 24%? It's in the private sector. The government can catch its own, but the private sector is where the problem lies. And I'll touch on that as we go. The default by previous beneficiaries, it continues to be a challenge for Helb because they didn't have structures back in the day. And to catch people, you need structures. You need a system of following them, finding them, developing that system, and then now using it, and then finding people who are likely trying to run away, because I'll mention that again, the economy isn't doing that well. It's a bit of a challenge. And the problem is that when you try and make Helb self-sufficient, like a revolving fund, money comes in, money goes out, money comes in, money goes out, right? Let the government do its thing, Helb should handle its own thing, right? When you don't have that money coming in, people are paying loans and there's no money coming in, a problem emerges. And it has an impact on the poor, because the poor are the ones who depend on these loans the most, because they didn't have cash to pay for it. So here's a funny thing, and this is why there's this mentality at Helb, right, of pushing people to the limit without caring about what is happening to them. One, because they are facing a shortage. There is pressure under them to make sure that the revolving fund is working, money in, money out. Another thing is they're also looking at commercial loans, and they can see that commercial loans, even though the rate of interest is higher, people are still repaying. So why aren't they repaying for help? Is it a matter of they don't care because it's the government? So they are pushing these policies, and I'll mention them as we go, thinking that, if you guys are paying commercial loans, then why aren't you paying help loans? And the government, we can catch our own, but the private sector is the one that's a problem. And people who are borrowing from the private sector, let's say commercial loans, they're the private sector mostly. So why aren't you guys paying for our loans? So anyway, that was the question. And that goes back to this next part.